Right. Okay, Ray, thank you so much and welcome back. It's now 7 sharp. Good morning. Beautiful Wednesday morning. Today being the viewpoint, let's take a look and fly across our borders all the way to France and take a look what's happening. We started with the news bulletin where you heard where President William Ruto spoke quite candidly when it comes to matters G7 that is happening and actually culminating today in Evian in France. The G7 world leaders are meeting there. So I want us to take a look basically what it really means for us as a continent, Kenya as a nation, and globally. But there is one thing that is coming out of that, that summit is that the Strait of Hormuz, there is some sense of, they're reconsidering on how they can get a new pathway, all right, because of what has happened between around 3.5 months, how the world suffered. That is going to be our discussion today. The G7 Summit 2026, the priorities for the leaders in France and what they should be taking home. Frank Nyamari, who is an advocate of the High Court, is here after a very long time. Franco. Yes. Hey, Bana, how are you?
I apparently got impeached from this studio.
You've been reinstated.
I've been reinstated.
That decision was vacated long time ago. That's why.
Now I'm back.
You're back.
But ideally, I've been serving Mwananchi out there.
Very good.
Doing some matters and looking at how best we can build our country.
Yes.
And propelling the youth agenda as far as elections 2027 are concerned. And I'm glad that this morning I'm able to speak about those matters and also what is happening in France as far as the G7 summit is concerned. And we are glad to have President William Ruto there, speaking the voice of Africa and articulating issues that more so touch on the country and are real to everyone.
Perfect.
So we look forward to the resolutions within that summit to see how best that the world can move forward. Yeah.
Perfect. Getting more into that. And Kevin Osido is Executive Director of the County Governors Watch, OGW. I get it right, OGW. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
You're well?
I am very fine, nashukuru Mungu.
Yes.
It's a beautiful day, wonderful June 17th, 2026.
Yes.
A day that we will never see again. And I'm grateful for the invitation to come and share with our viewers and the continent and indeed the global community what Kenya's presence in the G7, a very closed space, very specific to certain countries. You know, when they say a group of 7, somebody told me it could as well mean the Great 7. and I thought that's really
the highest table globally.
Yeah, so grateful for this opportunity to come and just speak about what that means to us. And when we have these high-level conversations, what do they mean to the common citizen? How does it translate to vitu kwa ground? So thank you.
Very good background check there. Thank you so much. And Amollo Simba. Amollo is also an advocate of the High Court. He's also governor's expert. He's not new to Jerusalem. Good morning, Amollo.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Karibu.
Glad to be back here.
Right?
Yes, looking forward to the discussion.
Asante. Okay, let me start with the front page of the local dailies, gentlemen. House Ifuna team is complicating Kalonzo regarding the 2027 poll lineup. That is a movement surge likely to increase its stakes in negotiation. I think this was long seen. The kind of journeys and campaigns they are making across the country, perhaps somebody can say that it's actually scaling up their point of and the stakes in negotiation. And yes, that story is on the front page and it continues page 6. You can take a look at that. I think this is something we've discussed here before, how that is going to happen. Ruto rallies for Africa's inclusion in global financial institutions. That has been his clarion call for a very long time, including some of the past summits that actually have been held here in the capital. He's been quite keen on financial autonomy when it comes to Africa, so that Africans should also have their own way of running their particular affairs. So there's here, on the front page, they are world leaders, and President William Ruto is the only African head of state there. That is what I have on the front page. On the Daily Nation, finance bill pressure. Lawmakers clash in-house over the proposed tax measures and the committee's recommendations. One of them is the legal action where the Consumers Federation of Kenya asks court to halt several provisions citing likely higher consumer prices And COFEC argues that new tax on food, health products and agricultural inputs will raise cost of living. And KRA also are seeking the powers. And lobby warns that a taxman could impose tax liabilities without prior notice to or make subjective assessments when it comes to that. And finally, they reckon that its hidden taxes on digital payment system will lead to more expensive transactions. That is on the consumer when it comes to the 2026-2027 finance bill. And former CJ Maraga pushes actually is now pushing for joint opposition flag bearer, close to almost the same as what's on the front page of the Star. But he spoke yesterday and he said that he's also putting pressure for a joint opposition flag bearer. Finally, on the front page of the Standard, apologize. Mr. President, there you go. Apologize, Mr. President. What does this photo remind you? 2024? I think this was the House Parliament invasion. And the Standard reports that can a government buy justice with compensation without avoiding accountability for the bloodshed that shocked a nation? As President William Ruto's administration moves to compensate victims of police brutality linked to the 2024 Gen Z protests, critics say that the process risks becoming little more than quote-unquote blood money if it is not accompanied by truth, apologies, and prosecutions. Paying victims while alleged perpetrators, the trigger-happy police officers and their commanders remain free entrenches impunity. Nearly 2 years on, many still demand answers. Who gave the orders? Who pulled the trigger? And who will be held accountable? That is on the front page of the Standard. Okay, gentlemen, let's come back home and talk about what is happening. So, Amollo, the G7 summit is happening. You can actually go ahead and take your favorite paper and read more details for yourself. Thank you very much. So, Amollo, the G7 is happening and actually is culminating today. There's so much, and when we listen to what President William Ruto said, perhaps the director can also play that briefly. We take a look. It stands out that we are making some good presence on the global arena. There's no doubt about that.
There's no doubt, yes. I think it's a good thing that the president attended the G7, the invitation for Kenya.
Yes.
Previously, there have been other African countries invited to the G7. Initially, there was South Africa that was supposed to attend this one. Then the invitation was rescinded because of the geopolitics.
Yeah.
And Kenya attending, I think it's a good thing. But for me, looking at it, the main impact would come from Africa. Africa being make a common front rather than individual countries being invited. There are those issues that of course the president has raised in terms of even when you look at the inclusion of Africa in the global financial infrastructure. Currently you get that many African countries face debt stress because the cost of borrowing for African countries is extremely high. Some borrowing as high as 15%, while the more developed countries borrowing as low as 1%. Yes. So I think that it's a good thing that we're invited, but real reforms will come when Africa approaches some of these summits from a united front rather than individual invitations. Yeah.
And why do you think it was only Kenya?
Of course, I think that it's all about the geopolitics and because currently the rapprochement between Kenya and France, we had the Kenya-France summit that was in the course of this year. So I think that because of the close relationship that probably Kenya is building with France, they found it fit to invite Kenya. And of course, initially South Africa had been invited, but currently, due to their diplomatic issues with the U.S., that could have contributed to the rescission of their invitation.
Yeah, Kevin, I mean, when you look at Kenya stepping into the global spotlight, one thing is quite common. The push for economic reset is quite open at the summit.
Oh, yeah, precisely. And thank you so much once again, Victor. If you look at the foundational principles of this kind of engagements, most of the group of 7 countries, talk about Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and US, have great investments in many countries or most countries in Africa. But if you went further to dig deeper into the kind of benefits that these African countries get, or the benefits that accrue, especially to the locals, many a times they are quite limited. And so the kind of conversations, therefore, that continue to happen seemingly do not favor Africans and African countries. And if you look at the kind of investments that these countries have in Africa, from energy to security to infrastructure, all the way to climate change, and even many, many other things, including financial investments, a lot of these, really, the people who more or less suffer the consequences, for instance, climate change, are Africans. With a continent of about 1.4 billion people, with an investment of, all these 7 countries put together, you, of course, Victor, expect that we are supposed to see benefits that really accrue, and what the locals can therefore be able to touch and say, these are the beneficiaries, what we are benefiting from our engagements and interactions with these global or the G7 countries. But if you look at the kind of conversations that happen, the infrastructure that set up the foundational principles of these engagements, some people would say they are archaic, they are very old. I remember President William Ruto even making reference at some point, if I am clear, that most of the policies were made after World War II, and therefore the kind of context that Africa is engaging in right now is one that really do not generate the benefits that we expect to see, particularly around engaging with most of these countries. And that is why even at the Africa-France summit that was hosted here in Kenya, you realize that President William Ruto was really pushing for certain reforms, especially when it comes to financial inclusivity. And this is largely because African leaders have a feeling that Africa is very underrepresented. There is no voting structure. They have a limited voting power. The decision-making is skewed to very small or very few countries. You have the kind of influence also that Africa has is very, very limited. You move further, Victor, and of course, if you look at the kind of interactions that happen, this is such a closed space that you have to be invited. So regardless of the kind of governance structures that Africa could have, from Africa Union, you come even locally here and talk about the East African community, you move it further even to look at Africa Development Bank. Most of these countries still interact with local or regional African institutions. And that is why, in my view, it is important, therefore, that Africa begins to have a voice. And invitations such as the one that President William Ruto has received, therefore, come to the fore to be able to begin to strengthen the kind of conversations that are therefore supposed to present the spaces of Africa. And I believe, I agree with Amollo, that Africans therefore must begin to treat their local businesses as serious business. Because if we do not affront a very strong African position, we will not be taken seriously. And this I take back to, for example, the Africa Climate Summit.
That was also raised at the last summit in Nairobi.
Yes.
Yeah?
If we have invitations and platforms where African leaders, like ACS in 2023, Africa Climate Summit, where we need to have a strong voice, and African leaders don't show up. Some of them consider those as small meetings. You move it further to the summit we had early this year, and some African leaders don't show up. The question then that would be begging is, are we able to front a common voice? Are we able to speak together as a continent? And therefore, are our leaders able to really generate benefits that accrue from serious conversations like this? And Victor, as I finish, it is therefore important that even as we have this discussion on the G7, we also look at some of the outcomes from the Africa-France summit that Kenya hosted. So that when we move to, for example, global the G7 conversations, we are able to say, this is the kind of progress and traction that we have received based on the conversations, and so this is the position of Africa. So it is important, therefore, that Africa African countries speak from a common voice, from a common front, and that when President William Ruto is speaking in France, he is not speaking when he's representing Africa in the G7, therefore he's not there by virtue of a Kenyan president. We need to see him as a continental leader who is speaking on behalf of several other African countries.
Frank, that perhaps, and I like the way they have opened it, because so it's not about Kenya.
Yeah.
It's about Africa to the world.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But that is not just something that President William Ruto or Kenya representing Africa in that global summit, that round table of the big great seven gentlemen. Let me use that word.
Now, first of all, we must appreciate what has been there before. That Africa has always been invited to listen, as Africa has always been invited to be just an attendant. But you see now, there is now an opportunity for Africa to speak its voice.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy, or rather I'm so excited to see that at long last we have a table. We can now sit amongst the great, if you call them that. We can now sit amongst the great and push the agenda that not only touches on Kenya, but also touches on across Africa. Now, Victor, we must look at the problems that Africa has faced. For example, the issues that are climatic in nature, Africa is always suffering. Not only Kenya, Africa as a continent is also always suffering. When the West is fighting, we are the ones who receive the repercussions of the war. We are the ones who receive the heat. We are the ones who are always affected.
Yeah.
So when President Ruto is on the table speaking, it's a good thing. But when he is leading that conversation, it's more significant as a people of Kenya and as Africa as a whole. And let us remember that in this G7 summit, South Africa has been invited to those summits before. But the issues that President William Ruto is articulating now, and I want to agree with my colleague here, those are issues that are touching on the African people as a generation currently. They are not issues that policies that were made after World War II would address. They are issues that can be addressed by a candid conversation. They are issues that can be addressed by realistic examples and looking at the way forward. So therefore, having President William Ruto on that table is a good thing. Him leading the conversation is significant. And finally, him presenting the agenda to the world and influencing the change that we so all require is something that is going to be of a great testament to the country and the continent at large.
Okay. Again, the geopolitical challenges that we are actually facing, because take a look at what's happening in South Africa. It's not something that we would be so happy to witness today, or perhaps Africa. South Africa is considered to be the New York of Africa, so to speak. But whatever is happening is affecting the face. Now, what do you think, this is to all of you, that is going to be a dynamic change, or what is going to change the paradigm shift on how Africa is going to be seen? Is Kenya taking the space of other African countries? That's number one. Number two, what do you think is running through the minds of other African heads of states, seeing Kenya representing them there at the G7? Amollo, what do you think is running through the minds of other African heads of states?
Okay, so first, what's happening in South Africa is quite unfortunate.
Yeah. Like
where we are seeing the xenophobic attacks against fellow Africans. I think that Africa, we need to work towards free trade and free movement, because our strength lies in our unity. You look at the European Union, it's a strong trading partner, and the economy is strong because of the fact that the free movement and free trade, like the fact that the European Union as a group, in terms of that integration,
yes,
that's what makes them strong.
Yeah.
As long as African countries which each stand individually will never be strong, our negotiating powers, in terms of even how we portray our issues at the global stage, will remain being a challenge. So I think that what is happening in South Africa is a symptom of what's happening across Africa in terms of the competitions between countries rather than integration. Right now, President Ruto is there at the G7. I'm not sure whether is like where you asked whether what's going through African leaders, whether it's gone there to represent the African continent, like whether there is a common position that they've agreed on that is going to represent. Because the problem again now that we face as Africa is that divide and rule, whereby each leader is portraying the position of their country. My thinking, again, as I said, it would have been more effective if we had African representation, not just a specific leader being invited in their capacity, but rather going there as representation of Africa. We would have also had maybe having the AUC chair being invited there to represent an African position. Like, what is it that, is there an African resolution that has been agreed on that is going to be pushed at the G7? Because, like, we look at it in terms of resources. We have a lot of resources in terms of the population. We have a lot of bargaining power. But unless we front that as a united front, we have no leverage. So it is good for him, but my thinking that it would be more effective had he tried also to build, maybe even after the summit, trying to build consensus in terms of resolution by African states, taking a common front. Otherwise, some of these things will be nothing more than talk. We'll go have flowery discussions, but then after that, in terms of the implementation, and you know, like, there's always no free lunch. You have to fight for your space at the table, and Africa can only fight for its space at the table by going through a united front. And fronting in terms of integration.
You have to fight for your space at the table. But basically, I'm trying to imagine how if Kenya loses that space already, because, you know, you have to squeeze yourself. You have to squeeze yourself, and once you become comfortable there, makes your voice heard. Basically, that also reminds me of the same question as I'm also asking you. What is running through the minds of other African sovereign states? We had the Kenya-France summit just the other day, Africa-France summit happening here, and we saw a number of heads of state coming here. But now Kenya, as an individual, being at that table, when you look at Narendra Modi, you know, the President Donald Trump there, of course we'll talk about his body language as well during the photo session, which is quite keen to talk about. But what do you think is, do you think the President has a lot of weight on his shoulder while attending this summit?
Victor, my very straightforward answer to that question is that yes.
A heavy load.
He has an extreme load on his head. One, the President of the Republic of Kenya has to continuously enhance the space that he now has as a convening power. President William Ruto and Kenya has convened serious conversations. Africa Climate Summit is not a small thing, especially if you look at the kind of conversations that have to do with climate change, climate adaptation funds, poverty issues, food security, trade and investment opportunities in Africa. And then you move it further to the Kenya-France summit that we just had the other day, and you're talking about artificial intelligence and AI and digital innovation, technological development. These are conversations that are not small. They are things that the President has therefore to show that Kenya taking this lead role as a convening power means something not just to us as a country, but indeed as a continent. Number two to that is to be able to convince his fellow African leaders that we are not doing this, or I am not doing this just as a Kenyan leader, but it is all for us. Because remember that if you look at certain documents like Agenda 2063 of the AU, that document treats Africa as one state, one nation, one people. And that really has to be the rallying call. If you look at the infrastructural developments, and even locally here, we are talking about LAPSET that cuts all the way from Lamu to Ethiopia. These are not small conversations. And so President William Ruto is saying that I am coming in as somebody who has demonstrated And you see when he invites leaders, for example, the France president, Emmanuel Macron, and he shows up. It's not a small thing. It shows that he has what it takes to be able to more or less, as others would say, quote unquote, the blue-eyed boy of other people, of the big boys, you know. And that really is something that other leaders must be able to appreciate, that President William Ruto is also being looked at as somebody that can be listened to. Number two, they have to look at Kenya as a voice for Africa. This country is the gateway of Africa.
Yes.
Kenya stands tall as a regional leader. So other African leaders must also be able, let me say should, without necessarily using the word must, now begin to see Kenya as a voice for Africa. That for the things that President William Ruto has been talking about, you talk about reforms of global financial institutions, you talk about fair climate financing, Victor, you talk about lower borrowing costs for African countries, you talk about global, greater representation of Africa in global decision making. These are conversations that go beyond Kenya. And President William Ruto is saying Kenya wants to be this voice that really can be listened to, can take up your issues, and therefore can be able to speak them out there. And that is why it is important, in my view, that even as Kenya is looked at as a diplomatic bridge, that other leaders also seize the competition, the imagination that maybe there are benefits that would accrue to them that Kenya probably is taking over. I do not think that that is the kind of imagination. It is neither the imagination nor is it the intention of President William Ruto insofar as he's going out there to be able to speak on behalf of people, of these African leaders. And fact of the matter, Victor, is that Kenya is also a regional leader. If you look at the transect between East and Central Africa, this country hosts the biggest refugees in other globes. Kenya has made certain strides, of course, without going into the controversial details around Kenya's security presence in Haiti, among others. We have made certain strides that can be able to show Kenya as a regional leader, as a bridge to be able to have other countries engage with Kenya. So in my view, therefore, President William Ruto has a heavy load laden on his back to be able to convince his peers that yes, this is what it is. And even as he engages at this global table, it is important that we also have trickle effects. So that when AU meets, the president is supposed to be given a very fair opportunity to share some of the lessons or what he has come back with from these kind of tables. It is important that AU takes up this kind of conversations as the Africa Union and other bilateral and multilateral institutions like ICGLR, the International Conference on the Great Lakes region that has about 12 to 14 countries. They must be able to also plug in to be able to show what exactly this kind of conversations mean. So that, Victor, we take this conversation from a global stage to a regional stage, to a national stage, and then we break the benefits to the common African citizens.
Okay. I want to take a break, but Frank, we all know that this summit has got no legal authority to enhance some of the decisions that they make. Although they stand that benefit of the doubt and, you know, they have that priority to actually challenge because they have got the muscle to influence the global economic, you know, priorities and channels and all that. I'm just wondering if the G7 were to say that the Strait of Hormuz is active and open, what would be the reaction? Because we are seeing America has a voice, and they're also talking of another opportunity of saying that they're looking for another option, all right? So that they just don't depend on Strait of Hormuz. I'm just trying to imagine, what if that's their stand?
You see, Victor, we appreciate what the Strait of Hormuz has done globally.
Yes.
And we also recognize that major trade as far as fuel and goods from east is concerned, pass through there. Now, where we have a conflict, and this has been witnessed, the effects have been witnessed within the African countries as far as the high fuel prices are concerned, is that now that is a question to be addressed. And I like the fact that it's among the agenda to be addressed between the nations at the summit, that there has to be ways to ease trade within countries around the world. And so whether the Strait of Hormuz is going to be opened should not really be a factor to be considered or looked at, or maybe make the leaders change their minds as far as opening a new route is concerned. They should make everything possible to ensure that trade globally flows, such that when world crisis, governance crisis comes about, states are not held at ransom at the expense of two nations fighting. You understand?
Yes.
So now, opening a new route, they should actually seek to open new routes, not just one, new routes from the south, west, so that nations can have ways of dealing with crisis when two giants are fighting.
Which actually is one of the biggest discussions there. I want to take a quick break. If we come back, I'll still circle back and come to you.
Okay.
It's also important to know that the G7's countries include Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States.
Yes.
So who are the invited partners? Invited partners. Invited partners include Global South leaders from Brazil, Egypt, India, Kenya, and South Korea were invited to participate. So I think it's just clear to maintain that Kenya is not a member of the G7. They are invited partners.
Yes.
So when you're an invited partner, you also have a voice. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. And welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Amollo Simba, advocate of the High Court and governance expert. Kevin Osido, executive director and County Governors Watch is also OGW. Very important to mention, OGW. And Frank Nyamari, an advocate of the High Court. Asante sana, gentlemen, for staying with us. So I'll just come back to you, Frank. Now, the continent is here, but I've just mentioned some of the invited partners. Let me take that again. Director is also going to play that clip by President William Ruto. Invited partners include the Global South. We have Brazil, we have Egypt, we have India, Kenya, South Korea. All they were invited. But the main G7 members include Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and of course the United States. Look at these members. The kind of financial power, the economic power they have is enough to dictate how things can be.
Yes.
More so, France hosting it and United States attending. You get it? That sends a very big signal.
Yes.
What if President Trump said he's not going to attend? And you have Ukraine and Russia war on that other side?
Yes. We know the theatrics President Trump sometimes plays as far as
he would pull.
He might pull anything.
Yeah.
But you see, for a summit that is focused on addressing global issues, such as trade, the growing tensions as far as governance is concerned, trade, the rise of technology. My colleague has mentioned about artificial intelligence. For a summit that is actually focused on addressing global issues, a nation excusing themselves from attending should not be an issue.
Yes.
They should just proceed and have the issues addressed and come up with the resolutions that are geared towards addressing the issues that are on the table. Now, Kenya is an invited partner. That is an opportunity that Kenya has been given, and also even the continent, to be able to address or rather speak about the issues that are affecting the continent at large. Now, look at the countries or the states that have been invited as partners to attend the summit. And look at the challenges probably they are all facing across. These are challenges that not only cut across the invited states, but they also cut across any developing state.
Yes.
Globally.
Yes.
Things to do with trade, things to do with look at the kind of intimidation that, economic intimidation that the United States will bring on the table if they were to, for example, they cut out what is called the USAID. They refused that. They said that they are no longer going to fund those activities. We can now see the impact that has had as far as things like HIV and AIDS drugs are concerned. So the issues that these G7 states are addressing are issues that cut across globally. But then a summit that is now focused on addressing those issues, they should just focus and address them. When we have a country like Kenya representing Africa, then we expect real issues to be addressed by our president. And I like that he has, even before being invited to this summit, taken a stand and addressed himself as far as those issues are concerned.
So he's a special envoy, so to speak.
Yes.
Special envoy. Before I come to you, Kevin and Simba, let's just take a listen to what President William Ruto said in France with regards to this. A quick one.
Energy transition, whether it is food security, whether it is labor mobility, or whether it is building a bigger market, Africa will have a say. Artificial intelligence, Africa is not going to be merely a consumer, that Africa is going to write the rules and is going to be co-creators on how artificial intelligence drives the next industrial and global revolution.
The head of state named the summit as consequential and significant meeting for Africa, building on the 2023 Africa Climate Summit.
Discuss and consolidate our position, ideas and suggestions on how climate change and the effects of it were affecting not just us, and Africa did not need to continue just being a victim, but a significant contributor to how a solution could be found.
President Ruto is expected to use the G7 summit platform to push for reforms for the global financial systems.
This is no longer going to be a relationship about dependency. It's going to be a relationship about sovereign equality. It is not going to be a relationship about aid, charity, assistance. It's going to be a relationship that we want about mutually beneficial partnerships.
The head of state has been invited by French President Emmanuel Macron, who is assuming the presidency of the summit of the world's 7 advanced economies and democracies, to participate in the high-level meeting. Isufar reporting for Good Morning Kenya.
Very, very heavy words there, Kevin. Very heavy words. I mean, I actually was noting them down. I've run out of space. Talk about the global financial, there's no dependency here. He's talked about the issue of sovereign equality. He's talked about the issue of AIDS. There's nothing like that. In other words, we are not begging. That's the key word. Hey, we are coming here as equal partners. I think President William Ruto uses that word a lot. Equal partners. Go ahead.
Yeah, precisely, Victor. And that is why initially, when we began this discussion, I indicated that Africa has enormous blessings, enormous wealth. But when you look at the G7 countries, in addition to others, the benefits that they gain from Africa do not equally accrue to locals within Africa.
Yes.
And there are many countries, and I think we have sat here in the past and looked at how even conflicts, wars, reverberate around raw materials and natural resources that come from Africa to some of these countries, which really beg the question around sovereign wealth and sovereign equality, so that what the locals within these African countries or Africa should be benefiting should be put together, juxtaposed with the benefits that these countries also gain and benefit from, rather get from Africa. And that is why the president is being very clear around sovereign equality, because he is also aware that that Africans are complaining around the investments that some of these countries make in Africa that do not relate to the equal measure of what they get, particularly when it comes to raw materials and natural resources. Number two, the president is saying that we are coming in as mutual beneficial partners.
Yes.
That yes, you have what you're bringing to the table, but we are also not just coming in as beggars. We are not coming in to seek for aid.
Listen to us, there's something else on the table.
We are coming in to be able to present something And that is why he's talking about, co-creators. Co-creators means that we are creating something together as a couple, as people who have mutual benefits. And I like the words that the president is using, because these are words that are not just said by any other person. He's a gentleman who is indicating that, yes, we also have the power, as I said, to be able to convene. Because co-creators mean that, yes, we have the right to say yes to your invitation, but we can as well say no. But we are saying yes because we have invited you to our country. For example, when we had the Africa Forward Summit, the Africa-France Summit that was hosted in Kenya, and we had the French president showing up. We had other African leaders coming forward. And so the president is using this kind of opportunity to indicate that Africa also has something to offer. And this thing that we have to offer really is something that not any of the African countries can do it alone.
Yeah.
We are coming in as a bloc, we are coming in as a region, we are coming in as a continent of almost 1.4 billion plus. And that is why I like even the list of the invited partners. Because if you look at the histories of some of those countries, Victor, when the president talks about food security, look at Brazil and its strength in agriculture. So maybe they are coming in to be able to share. How are you making it? To be able to be one of the global producers of rice, for example. If you look at India and health, and locally we have talked about the former Prime Minister.
And actually I was going to come to the criteria that the G7 used to invite the other invited partners.
So there must be something that President William Ruto is saying, as all these other countries that you have invited bring something to the table, you go to South Korea and its security and economic power. The innovation, technological advancement in South Korea. Look at the number of phones that those guys produce in a day. Young people, the Gen Zs in South Korea are coming up with extreme innovations around technology. So the G7 is saying, we are inviting you to bring something, contribute something to the table, and it doesn't have to be financial resource. Give us ideas, give us innovation, show us how we can be able to jointly do it. And so, Victor, it is therefore critical that Africa stands tall. President William Ruto goes there to be able to also present a case on behalf of Africans. We'll look forward to seeing how other African leaders are taking up this. And of course, not to forget, as I finish, that even as the president is standing tall as a global leader, locally there could be issues. You talk about the protests, you talk about issues to do with governance debates. We are currently talking about the finance bill. You talk about issues of political tensions within different political parties. He is the president. You talk about his engagements with other countries like DRC, Congo, and the different groupings that are there. These are concerns that we should not let out of the table. But we are saying that when we talk about such conversations, a round table of influencers like the G7, then President William
Ruto, to the president, his body language, his demeanor, it reminds you of some of the summits that has been held in Nairobi, and the common stand that those heads of state had. This is just, President William Ruto, we are sending you, and this is our stand. Talk about the issue of climate change. It has been there for a very long time. Talk about of the global financial respect that they're also looking at. The president talked about we are coming as co-creators. We are not coming as, this is us. Listen to us as well. What have you picked from him?
So I think that those are flowery words by the president.
What do you mean?
They're nice, yeah, in terms of they're nice and really look appealing. But I would be hesitant to pop champagne yet, because these are words we've had since independence. We had Kwame Nkrumah calling for Africa unity, about Africa being treated equally. And over the decades, over 5 decades later, we still have Africa having the short end of the stick.
And do you think this is deliberate?
I think that what is happening is that for us, unless Africa, we make deliberate steps to integrate, to make a common front, we will not have a seat at the bargaining, a seat at the table. Because you look at it, some of these things, it's about what power you have. The reason, whenever US speaks, we are able to, they're able to control them, to shape the world direction. You look at the economy and the economic, both the economic and military might. That's why even today, like if US engages in war, it affects the entire world economy. If you are a minority shareholder, like today, if you are a minority shareholder at Safaricom, you get that you as an individual minority shareholder, you may not be able to shape you may not be able to shape much in terms of the direction of the company. But if you rally other minority shareholders together, you can be able to at least put a strong voice. So my point is that it is possible for, like at this summit, Kenya putting, like making strong statements at the summit and at whatever global stage, but unless there is clear, deliberate effort by Africa as a continent moving together, and that's why I still go back to the example of the EU. You look at in the EU, you look at whether the regulation, how they regulate technology. If there are certain laws that are passed on regulation, it would be affecting the entire EU bloc. That's around 28 countries. So if EU, for example, say that technological companies have to comply with this, Facebook, Twitter, all those global giants would have no option but to comply with this. But then in Africa, you'd have Kenya having this position on this. Currently, let's say AI, we have our regulation, Uganda their regulation, and we contribute little to the economy, to the global economy. So it does not give much incentive for us to even be able to leverage in terms of the other international, the multinational companies. So we need to, the key focus should be on the integration, even as we push for some of this agenda. Otherwise, it will be all talk.
Okay, I want us to come to something which is quite important. I mean, look at the Russian-Ukraine war. They also touched on it. And they also agreed to intensify its, sanctions on Russia and actually to make sure that the shadow fleet and the energy that is coming out of that is also taken care of. But let's talk about that. Zelensky attended. President Donald Trump is also there. You look at the body language, Kevin, the body language and the declarations coming out of there, open Strait of Hormuz. Just before that, it was open now. I think perhaps, was it deliberate? Now that Trump was attending and Strait of Hormuz is opened, it's confusing.
Of course, Victor, it is expected that before these leaders meet, there's a lot of diplomatic negotiations.
The backroom negotiations.
Exactly. A lot of conversations, discussions around a long list of people to be sent, who is supposed to speak to who, how are we supposed to say our words, what does a handshake mean, what kind of suit are you to put on, what kind of color of attire are you supposed to put on, a lot of things that happen. So that when actions are taken before such a serious conversation, they are also sending certain messages. So you open the Strait of Hormuz, and then suddenly there are conversations that happen. I wouldn't be surprised if again after this particular conversation, other things happen, other actions are taken, because each of these partners have something not only to offer but also to benefit. And as this is happening, you have Ukraine, the conversations around Ukraine-Russia war happening, and so the discussions really are, I would call it a full mouth, full table. Maybe the time is limited. As Kenyans say, masaa ni machache lakini mambo ni mengi sana. And so you have to also pick up your priorities. What is the most important thing that you want to say? Remember that even as these leaders are meeting, they also have ambassadors and high commissioners. People who over time are picking data, they are collecting intelligence, they know who is doing what, how are we supposed to intervene and engage. And so the kind of body language, for example, that we see with leaders such as President Trump, are things that are supposed to send certain messages. If he's happy about what you are doing, he'll give you a thumbs up. Every time we are seeing him, for example, with President William Ruto, doing a thumbs up. I've never seen President William Ruto locally here giving a thumbs up, but when he meets President Trump, as he's giving his thumbs up, which is not just because of the president of Kenya. He's been doing this all the way from Magma, Make
But the thumbs
America.
up has been Donald Trump's signature.
That's what I'm saying. That he's been doing this over from the Magma discussions, Make America Great Again, during his campaigns and all that. So there is something that is sending. When he, for example, takes a photo with you smiling, there is something that is communicating. When he is frowning, he is communicating something which of course might not be dealt with at the level of the G7 discussions. It has to be picked up again with their diplomatic leaders and officials and move it further. But the most important thing is for us as Africa. What do all these conversations mean? So when you talk about oil and gas and the discussions around fuel, fact of the matter again, Victor, is that Kenyans, I keep talking about Kenyans, but Africans are the ones who are facing the brunt of all these issues. What African leaders, in my view, need to think about is how to have regional deposits of oil. How to go about it is a discussion for another day. But must we be looking up to certain regions, certain leaders? Yet we have, for example, the Nigerian Dangote, who has very good innovations. And I remember even President William Ruto talking about him in one of the panel conversations that he has had about this discussion. So what do those kind of efforts that local African leaders are making and taking mean to us, particularly when we go to this kind of table? So that when we talk about what are you bringing to the table, President William Ruto, on behalf of all the other African leaders, should be saying, we have regional deposits. We have things that we can be able to do. In my country, at a place called Lake Turkana, we discovered oil more than 13, 14 years ago. This is a deposit that is lying there. Is it something that we can be able to mint? Is there a value that it can be able to add if it can be processed and used as fuel? What does that mean? So that we also benefit, therefore, from this kind of discussions. I would be so happy when President William Ruto, for example, comes back and says, I went there, I represented Africa, but as a Kenyan president, the oil in Turkana, the deposits that are there mean 1, 2, 3 to us. The kind of tanks that we have in Mombasa, honestly, the Kenya pipeline should be something that presents a big discussion, Victor, when we talk about products that byproducts or inputs towards an economic development, because energy really is something that no country can be able to develop or move forward without.
We have a few minutes, but the question I have to all of you, as you are closing remarks, do you think whoever is concerned, I don't know, would be so happy to see that the Strait of Hormuz is other countries get an option?
Yes, and I
don't know who would be happy. I don't know who would be not willing to let Strait of Hormuz go. I don't know.
Yes, Victor, we appreciate the role that the Strait of Hormuz plays as far as global economics is concerned.
Yes.
But where there is conflict, and I like the fact that conflict is part of the agendas to be discussed on that table. But where there is conflict and that Strait of Hormuz is closed for one reason or the other,
who will suffer more?
We all agree that Africa will suffer more. Not even the West, not even the East, not even the Africa is the one that receives the most adverse challenges.
Who is the lead guitarist here when it comes to Strait of Hormuz?
So you see, Iran and the United States of America have taken a very hard stance that has affected everything globally. So when we are looking at the Strait of Hormuz in terms of those two nations, we need to come up with a solution.
Great.
We need to come up with a solution. That in the event that the US is not able to agree with Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz is basically bordering Iran, what other alternative does the world has as far as trade is concerned? That is the question that needs to be dealt with at the G7 summit or even any other summit that presents such a question. The question is, the thing is, there is need for the world to look at the Strait of Hormuz differently.
And depend on it less.
And depend on it less. So that they create new routes, probably from the west and from the south, such that when there is an issue at the Strait of Hormuz, the other routes can be.
I was waiting for you to say that we should have an oil deposit, maybe depot in Changamwe.
I was getting there. I was getting there.
Okay.
And I was actually I was going back to what the president said, that Africa is rich, and we cannot come to the table as beggars.
Okay.
We have now to come to the table as equal partners and put in place necessary infrastructure to be able to deal with our problems as a continent.
All right.
Yes.
Amollo,
Yeah.
the lead guitarists One, who is the lead guitarist? One, are they one, two people?
Okay, so if you look at it regarding from Strait of Hormuz, it's the control by Iran,
right.
And that gives them the greatest leverage in terms of any conflict. If I were them, I would also still do the same, like in terms of control, because at the end of the day, if they didn't have that control of whereby they can be able to have an impact on the global economy, they would not have leverage in negotiations. So yeah, it makes sense. Maybe what we need to, and the fact that even if you look at other routes, even if the shipping lines go through other routes are longer, making the transportation costs higher, which will translate to the supply. Like so, all this thing about supply and demand. So it will. The cost will go higher. Yeah, because I think around 20% of the 20% of like the global oil supply pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So once you close it, now you have 20% less, and with that, automatically due to the supply and demand, loss of supply and demand, you have the prices going higher. Maybe from African perspective, what we need to do is looking at protecting ourselves from global shock, because such like things will always happen. In the next a few years from now, there'll definitely be also something happening, something affecting the global chain. If we are able to look at promoting intra-African trade, like we have Nigeria or producing oil, so Sudan producing oil, how can we look at it in terms of whether instead of over-reliance on exports from outside Africa, if we have, we can be able to, and that it means developing in terms of the supply chain, whether the transport infrastructure, so that we can be able to promote more intra-African trade rather than over-reliance on outside countries, so that even in the instance where there are those shocks, global shocks will always be there, we reduce the impact on African countries.
Okay, Kevin, 30 seconds. I think we're time up. So 30 seconds. What next? Also responding to that in 30 seconds, kindly.
Yeah, what next is what's up for Africa from the G7 discussion. Why is the president there? What does that mean to us as locals and indeed even as a continent? I am hoping that these discussions will then be trickled down to other African leaders. Let the AU convene a special conversation table, and so that we don't wait for the annual calendar of the Africa Union. Look at the low-lying fruits that Africa has to be able to even domesticate as independent countries. And I believe that way the locals will be able to see value, Victor, in some of these discussions. Otherwise, it will just be too much talk, very little or no action.
Thank you. I mean, you know, we've talked so well. Actually, at some point I thought that we're in France. But when you come back, should we change our behavior, our demeanor, how we talk? Because it's just about to go down. Weekend is approaching, and you know what happens during weekends in this country. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I think we have to wrap it up there. The partnership, the statement that came out there, they deliberated on international partnership. They talked about health interventions. India is a very big, it's actually big when it comes to healthcare. They talked about security and geopolitics, as well as transactional crime, how to collaboratively agree on targeting migrant smuggling. I think that's why US have been so much keen on some of the players going to the US for the World Cup. They have been so keen on that. All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming to the show. That's where we wrap it up. And we hope that things are going to change. Amollo Simba, an advocate of the High Court and governance expert, thank you so much for coming. Kevin Osido, OGW, Executive Director of the County Governor's Watch, and Frank Nyamari, an advocate of the High Court. Three wise men. They saw the star in the morning. My name is Victor Oloo. Good morning. Have a good day.